중국이 개입을 했어. 계속 그 왔다 갔다 한 3년의 싸움을 이긴 후에 소련하고 미국하고 이제 개입을 해서 휴전 협정을 해줬어. 그래서 38선이라는 그 경계선을 만들어서 서로 침범하지 말라고 서로 선을 긋고.
근데 지금 38선은 그러면 안 돼.
아 그렇지. 더 위쪽에 있었는데.
휴전선이라 불러야 돼.
아 그래 뭐 38 휴전선. 됐지? 38 휴전선이라고 하면 되지? 또 근데 이거 내가 왜 얘기해야 돼? 네가 얘기해야 되는 거 아니야?
자,
the work of salvation that God actually performed through the Israelites. And as I am preaching about this work that is written in the book of Exodus, I come to realize once again that the Word of God is the living Word. And so if we actually talk about the timing of this incident, it's about 3,000 years ago. And our nation really has no connection with the nation of Israel. However, the gospel is actually the work of God's salvation. And it's not that Israel is a special nation, but it just happens to be that of all the nations, God happens to choose Israel, and it's the work that He has chosen to display through Israel. And so all the blessings that happened took place in the wilderness. We really need to be able to confirm the same type of blessings in the individual's lives and also the current today's church as well. And we should be thankful that we are able to actually confirm this taking place in our life. And as much as this is taking place in our lives, we are able to confirm, and more than anything else, we are able to actually understand and proclaim the message in a more factual, truthful way. And when I look at myself, it's like that. And when I look at other workers in China, I think it's the same with them as well. To say that the actual leaders are transcending their limits, that's not an easy thing to do. And when I look at their church members and also their church, you can actually tell what kind of a church leader that they have. Would God be limited? According to everyone's individual level, He is simply revealing His work through the people. And so the wilderness that God actually brought the Israelites into through Moses, this was God's perfect plan of salvation. And so no matter where you look in the Bible, there's no other place where this has been meticulously carried out, starting from Exodus. And 40 years in the wilderness. Not only that, but guiding them all the way into conquering the land of Canaan. And so we should not just look at this foreshadow and think that that's everything. It's simply a foreshadow, so just take it as a foreshadow. And we need to be able to, as much as we accept it as we should not actually consider that this is everything for ourselves as well. It's not complete. And I keep telling you that even if we do seem to understand what's going on, it is still according to our own level. And even if God's glory is revealed through us, that is also according to our own level. This entire thing is basically a lifelong process. Only Jesus Christ is complete. And so I keep telling you this. The blessing that the Israelites received in the wilderness. When we look at their state where they had no choice but to actually enjoy this kind of a blessing, and also the life of Moses, where Moses had no choice but to enjoy this kind of blessing. We need to see the work that God has done in Moses' life. 40 years in Egypt and 40 years in the Midian desert. And just like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, it's not that his entire life has been recorded. It simply skips over to where it says after he has grown up. He was already 40 years old. So from the moment that he was actually born and was adopted by the Pharaoh's daughter until he became 40 years old, it was just basically one incident. But it actually becomes an entire turning point for him to actually flee from Egypt into the wilderness, to the wilderness of Midian. And even from then until he comes across a burning bush, until the calling of Moses by God, it has a record of Moses meeting Jethro and marrying his daughter and having a son. Other than that, there's no other record. So if you look at that, you can actually realize that it's not our life story. That's not the important thing. And even if it was recorded, it's recorded because that story itself is important. But not that story, but the essence is the story of how God actually saved us. In other words, it's recorded because for the sake of the gospel, and for the sake of the gospel, our life is important. Because only the gospel is eternal and is the work that God has done. And this is the only thing that cannot change and will not be taken away from us. And this is our everlasting portion. And so I keep telling you this. So Moses living in Midian and God calling him when he is 80 years old through the miraculous sign of the burning bush. It's not just his life in the Midian desert, but his entire lifetime of 80 years, he's actually displaying that through this miraculous sign of the burning bush. The bush is just a regular bush. However, there were flames. But the bush is not burning. This is the mystery of salvation. And it's basically revealing God's glory as a miraculous sign. And also the works that he has done through Moses' 80 years. The suffering that the Israelites are going through, a life they're living where they have been bitten by a snake. It's actually killing them slowly, a little bit at a time, to a point where they have to become a total enslaved to Pharaoh. And only that way can they actually put some food in their mouth. And that was basically their estate at the time. And as God was sending Moses to them, he tells them, if they do not believe the fact that I sent you, he asks, what is that in your hand? He says, a staff. He says, throw it on the ground. And the staff turns into a snake. And then he tells Moses to take the snake by the tail. And once he does, the snake turns back into a staff. I'm telling you again that this is actually the work that God has done in the life of Moses for the past 80 years. It is the same staff, however, now it is a totally different staff. Not only that, place your hand inside your cloak. And so Moses obeyed. He put it inside and took it out. And he was probably very shocked because the moment he'd actually took it out, his hand was leprous. And he was shocked when a snake appeared through his staff. To a point where he had to run away. But this was probably even more disgusting. But God actually told Moses again to put it back into his cloak. And when he obeyed and put his hand back into the cloak, his flesh was restored. So as you continue to listen to this message, I don't know about you, but aren't you able to actually relate to this? Because this is not something that we can actually deny. And this is something that even the non-believers are actually experiencing. Then all the more the believers. Pastor, I understand. However, I know that I am being bitten by the snake in my life, and just like how you have said, grab the snake by the tail, and it becomes a staff again. And that staff was just something that I needed just to merely herd sheep and put food into my mouth. But now it actually became the staff that is now held in the hand of the mighty God, that's being used by the mighty God. And why is it that those miraculous things are not actually happening in my life? Yeah, my life is worth nothing. And I say that I am receiving grace just as I am. But why is it that the power of God is not actually taking place in my life? Don't you have this kind of a question? What is this? This is a miraculous sign. And I keep telling you this. The gospel has nothing to do with our own level. It is actually the work of God. This is the reality. And I keep telling you this. Even if we say we understand, it is according to our own level. And even if we don't understand, it is just because of our own level of understanding. And if we don't understand, then we say that we don't believe. And in that deception, we just flip over everything. And just like I have mentioned this before, he told the spies to actually go into the land of Canaan and spy for 40 days. But after they have seen the land, all the reports that they actually gave, the factual reports were actually the same for all of them. Except for, and they were basically giving the same reports, but two of them, the background where they're giving the report is actually different. The rest, they're actually saying the exact same report, but they're saying it with disbelief, while the other two were actually speaking the facts in faith. And so with this kind of a story, we say that, we have to believe like Joshua and Caleb, and those are correct words. But the reason why it is wrong is because we try to be the ones that are trying to believe like that. So then is it actually me that is believing, or is it God actually trying to make us believe? Yes, it is us that is actually believing. However, gospel needs to take place within the work that God is doing, even if it's just a little bit at a time, to a point where even though I am discouraged and I fall, however, God can still work through me, and I can say that I don't believe in God anymore, and yet works actually take place in the person's life, and those things actually happen quite a lot. And some people, they're discouraged, and then they call out in the name of the Lord, and some people actually do experience the power of God that way. What is the reality of God's salvation? We only hold on to the salvation according to our own level, and holding on to that evidence, we say that this is correct. But that just becomes our willpower to believe. And all the more in that situation, we're the ones that actually try to hold on to the covenant with our willpower. And there's no way that we should not, that we disbelieve. But that will never be able to overcome the force of darkness of this devil. And you will not be able to overcome the forces of sin, forces of the darkness. And so I tell you this. So whether we know it or not, the work that God is doing is already taking place in our life. And as much as He had done His work, this is actually being revealed to us. And so for those of you that have been, continuously listening to this message, you are now able to understand this a little bit, because why? This is the truth. And some people, it's very easy for them to actually make them believe just by giving them a little bit of a shock factor. But if it's something that is not true, it will all turn out, it'll all show in the end, because in the end, it does not add up. But as you continue to listen, you are able to actually verify the truth in your life little by little. But that does not happen because you have learned it and you have understood it and you have come to some kind of conclusion. It's not talking about that kind of a conclusion, but as much as a little bit, God, as much as He has been actually working out the salvation in your life, even if it is just a little bit, who is the one that has received salvation like you? If you have been actually living by faith like this, little by little, from first to last, this is what you will discover in your life. As someone, this person is actually over 80 years old. And so when I look at her, when she first received this message, her son actually committed suicide. And, when I looked at her life, she had so many spiritual oppressions. And within that oppression, she had that guilt as a mother or as a parent. And that scar, that pain of having to let a son go was immense. And I'm sure, it was a life where she was bitten by a snake. And because she was so desperate, she was listening to the message. And of course, there's no way she will be able to understand the message at the time. However, still, she kept on listening to the message continuously. So I think it has been about 6-7 years now. And time to time, I do give her a call in just to see how she's doing because she is of age. And when we have a little bit of fellowship together, all the works that God has done in her life is actually, hitting my heart. And I told her, you truly are blessed. 80 years. What is there to actually see? If you're young and you're more active, of course there's more things that you can actually do. But more and more, you'll realize that there's nothing for you to actually do. And even if you try to do something, the children will just tell her to just don't do it because they're afraid that something might happen to her. But her spirit, and she doesn't say. She's able to actually enjoy that blessing of being able to live her life. And so I really tell her that you truly are blessed. And I'm sure that's not everything. Sometimes she will fall. And she will say, because of someone, I lost hold of grace. And, she just starts saying all these things that happened to her and how she fell. And so when those things kind of happen, it's easy for you to just bind yourself to those things because you've been living in that kind of standard for 80 years and you become very strengthened or hardened in that sense. But now, sometimes God just, she's able to let it go within a few days, maybe that day, because God comes and visits her and disciplines her and chastens her. And, she will just tear up and she'll just be able to give thanks to God because it was God who actually saved her. And she's actually telling me her life story. Did I tell her to live that kind of a life of faith? Is this something that actually takes place through effort? So I told her this. When I look at you, the confession of Apostle Paul when he said that my outside body is actually rotting away, but inside, I am being renewed every day. And I can actually see you enjoying that little by little in your daily life. And when I see that, it makes me very joyful. And I'm able to give thanks to God who is actually allowing those works to take place in your life. And so our understanding of that, of course, it is true that God actually did work in her life. But in the end, we are still struggling in our own standard. And even if you are actually confirming it within your own standard, just recognize it as the fact that you are actually being deceived. And when I look at myself, it's like that. And that's why God is actually showing us through the Israelites and their 40 years in the wilderness. And that means it's repetitive, it's repeated, but little by little. And so if you are truly living by faith from first to last, then your sin will be revealed. And it's not something that you will end up trying to hide. And more it will become like this. Before, I thought that you had to actually try to live like this with your willpower. If something that is inside you is true, and if that what is true is actually something called faith, whether you can actually do it or not, you end up living a life where you are at least trying. And to that degree, you can actually stop yourself and you can actually have a form of holiness. But if you continue to live life like that, you will actually come to some kind of a plateau and you will never be able to expect something to become better. And you'll be considered lucky if things don't go south. But are you not able to see? God told Moses, place your hand in your cloak. And when he actually took it out, he obeyed God. And when he actually took out his hand, it should have been cleaner than before, but instead it became leprous. So don't be shocked. I told you this yesterday. God is a God of love. He is also God of justice. And that's why he reveals sin as sin. He's not a God of judgment. That judgment will come on the last day. But until then, this is God's long patience. He is a God of salvation. And so as much as you actually realize the work of God as the work of God, then how is that actually manifested in your life as you live your life? Sin, it is revealed as sin. Let's say that husband and wife are actually fighting. And before they used to not actually talk about a month, but it later becomes 15 days, and then maybe a week, and then later maybe 3 days. And those things actually take place because God has been working in their life little by little. But if they have been trying to do that on their own, then of course changes will not take place. And this is also the confession of David. All the things that you read in the book of Psalms, that he gained strength from he regained strength from the Lord. And those who are on the path to Zion, blessed are you. And all the people who have been bitten by a snake and they are whimpering because of their pain as they pass through the valley of Baca. They make it a place of springs. The fact that they're passing through the valley of tears is not the problem, but the fact that they're actually making it into a place of springs. That's what's important. It's not the problem of sin, but you need to be able to see God who is actually saving us from that sin, even if it's just a little bit at a time. And when you see sin as sin, you have to put it back into your cloak. What are you going to do? Are you going to try to hide it? No, you have to put it back into your cloak. And when he did, and took his hand out again, his flesh was restored. This is a blessing. Blessed are you, O Israel. Who is there like you that has received salvation from the Lord? And so time to time, those people, whether it is by text or whether it is via phone, for what reason would they actually text me, or why would they call me? I always, being bitten by a snake, because of my own sin, and I am going through suffering because of it. But little by little, in my individual's life, as someone who is blessed like the Israelites, as much as God allowed me to enjoy the blessing of the church in the wilderness, I'm able to actually see this as my joy, and I'm able to actually live according to it. And as much as I enjoy this, I have no choice but to actually share the gospel in this way. And of course, I have no other choice than to share it in my own level. But that's the only reason why I'm actually even sharing or helping other people. More and more as time progresses. It's not only me, but the other people who have been receiving grace with me. It's the same with them. And so they actually share those stories with me, whether it is through texts or whether it is through the phone or whether it is, through fellowship face to face. And God is actually allowing us to share these stories together. And this is joy for me. And this is the joy of an evangelist. It is also the joy of God. And so let us look at the scripture reading. Exodus chapter 4. Verse 8. Then the Lord said, if they do not believe you or pay attention to the first miraculous sign, they may believe the second. And so these two are miraculous signs. This is the work that he has done in the 80 years of Moses' life. From Exodus. And in the lives of the Israelites during the 40 years in the wilderness, this is the work that he is doing. Not only that, but he's also doing this work in front of the Pharaoh. And you will see later, but he's actually going to show the 10 plagues. At first, he said, tell them that you are sent by the God of your fathers, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and God of Jacob. And when he actually shows them the miraculous signs, they actually believe. And so when he said, let my people go, at first Pharaoh said, I will. And then after that, when sun goes down, he actually changes his heart. And then all of a sudden, he actually even makes the Israelites suffer even more. And then so when this actually continued, the Israelites actually told Moses, okay, stop. This is actually too much for us to handle. But when we look at that process, we call that the spiritual battle. On the surface, what we see is the Pharaoh. It seems like we're actually fighting the authority of Egypt. But however, through the visible things, we should be able to see the invisible work of God's salvation, which is the spiritual battle that's going on right now. And that's why the Lord says, if they do not believe you or pay attention to the first miraculous sign, they may believe the second. But if they do not believe these two signs or listen to you, take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground. The water you take from the river will become blood on the ground. And of course, this is not something that he actually did now, but this is something that he will do later. So we're just going to pass this on. But there is something that I would like to share with you regarding this. At first, Pharaoh's heart was hardened, but later on, God's wrath was basically poured out from the skies through the 10 plagues. But just like I mentioned earlier, after he would sleep and just wake up again, his heart would be changed again. So in the world of the flesh, yeah, if you hit, they will fall. And they might get back up. What am I trying to say? The reality of God's salvation, if you actually try to hold on to it as the evidence of the flesh, then that is not true faith. That is just faith based on your own willpower. It becomes some kind of an assurance within us. And so that when we meet an even bigger problem, that's even bigger than that assurance, then all of that faith that you considered faith, that willpower, it amounts to nothing. And so look at the Israelites. They actually they actually crossed over the Red Sea, and they went crazy over it. So when we look at that, when I read about that, you feel good yourself, because it was God who actually saved the Israelites and allowed them to cross over the Red Sea. And this is the true Jehovah God. This is the power of Jehovah God. And I'm sure you would dance with joy and sing and praise God because of it and give glory to God. How long did that last, though? And before, something like this did not make any sense to me. And of course, in my own level of my disbelief, even now, in that kind of a realm, there's a lot of evidence that they actually received during that time. And if something like that happened to me, I told myself that I will never behave like that. But God was actually revealing to me the same entire realm that I had along with them, where they actually changed within 3 days. And I was actually reading through, and I was thinking to myself, why are they like this? If I were like them, I would never behave this way. But for them to realize that this was of the flesh, it took them 40 years in the wilderness. And God actually reveals this to us through Pharaoh. And so he would say, I will let them go, but afterwards his heart is hardened again. So what kind of faith is this? And so the Israelites are saying, just leave us alone. You're making it more difficult for us. We'll just live in Egypt. But do you think it was just them? As I was actually proclaiming the gospel, I experienced this myself as well. I even told you this. So you might actually think that, oh, realizing the gospel this way is very valuable. But once they are deceived, this actually amounts to nothing later either. And I also was very shocked. It's the very same level. It's not that, those kind of influences are totally gone now. But that's why repetitively, the same problem that is also in me, God allowed me to meet those kind of people and meet those kind of process. And that's the reason why I needed to go through that. Because the flesh amounts to nothing. I have proclaimed that message so many times, and yet until those words to become a true reality of faith in my life, it was not your average process. Because the flesh will become enemies with God. So if you don't know this, the only thing that you will know is to basically abuse your flesh, because you will think that everything about the flesh is just wrong. But that's just religious living. I've actually done all of that. And I even had a very holy form myself. But that was a very dualistic kind of lifestyle. I would belittle the world. And I would condemn money. And I would look down on all the things that were worldly. Does that mean that that will make me very spiritual? The only things that are deemed spiritual are the things that have received salvation. That is not me that's living, but that's a world where it is Christ who is living through me, and He is the one that is controlling over me and my life. And that's when your spiritual life actually begins, and you will come to know what it really means to live a spiritual life. We are living in this world of flesh. However, little by little, you'll be able to come to discover what spiritual changes mean. And within that spiritual change, you will come to see, oh, I have actually abused my flesh. And I have abused it and I have belittled it. But now, I'm going to see flesh as flesh. And so I have told you this earlier a little bit yesterday. That's how you truly love yourself. If it's not for that, then you're going to love yourself and make yourself an idol for you. And because we have been totally traumatized by idol worshipping, you will also abuse yourself as well. Only the gospel can change us. Only the gospel can actually set us free from the law of sin and death. And that is the power of salvation. God has done the work of salvation. He is the one that fulfills the work of salvation in the lives of the believers, little by little, so that they may attain more of salvation and in their life of faith, as they live life on earth by faith. Look at verse 10. Moses said to the Lord, "O Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither in the past, nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue." So what does this mean? 40 years in Egypt and 40 years in the Midian desert. Within the 80 years that God has actually done in Moses' life, God actually showed Moses through a miraculous sign. However, the flesh, he still was bound to his trauma. And so as I was actually reading the Bible, I was just so thankful that it's recorded so realistically and factually. If it were you and me, we might have said, oh, God has been preparing me for 40 years, so don't even. And that burning bush was actually a miraculous sign that represents the entirety of 80 years of Moses' life. And he's also talking about the miraculous signs he's going to perform in front of the Israelites. And not only that, he actually told Moses, I will be with you, so go. But Moses actually tells the Lord, oh Lord, I have never been eloquent. Neither in the past. So this is another person that does not have an eloquent speech. So let me ask you, is it a good thing for you to be eloquent in speech, or is it a bad thing? And I'm sure, some of you might still be a bit confusing. But to be exact, if the background has not been changed in salvation, then it actually has. It is a double-edged sword. If one side is good, then to that degree, you will be bound to it, and therefore there will always be the opposite side. And we have that side of us that wants to see the other side. And I want to only focus on the good aspects, but as you are actually living your realistic life, those two things will be revealed exactly as is, and you will not be able to deceive it. The Lord said to him, who gave man his mouth? Who makes him deaf or mute? Who gives him sight or makes him blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Who is I? He's basically asking Moses, who am I? You don't know who I am? Now go, I will help you and speak and will teach you what to say. But still, Moses said, oh Lord, please send someone else to do it. And so after Moses grew up, he has refused to live as the Pharaoh's daughter's son. And he actually considered receiving suffering like the Israelites in order to save his own people more valuable than all the treasures of Egypt. And that's a sense of commission that he had. But when he turned 80 years old, God actually called him. And God is basically saying, I am going to give that actual commission to you. But Moses is basically saying, what is that commission? What is that calling? And so it is being revealed exactly as is. I also, with that kind of sense of commission, went into the missions field. And God basically broke me down as well. It was the same for Moses, and that's why he fled. His life amounted to nothing, and for 40 years, he was basically imprisoned as a shepherd. But God, nonetheless, did his work, regardless of Moses' level. Oh Lord. It's not, oh Lord, please take me as I am. Rather, it's, oh Lord, I am slow in speech and tongue, so please send someone else to do it. And therefore, Lord says, who gave man his mouth? Who makes him deaf or mute? I will be your mouth. God is actually telling Moses that he will be Moses' mouth. But he says again, oh Lord, please send someone else. And so in order for Moses to actually be like this, it probably means that he has been bit by snakes many times. And the depth of his sin, you know, we really have to see how deep our sin is. You know, continuously we need to open up and see. As much as we have sin, it needs to come out and be revealed. And when I look at myself, it's like that. And as much as I was not able to look at myself carefully, correctly, I would look at other people and I would also say, why are they like that? You know, they received grace this way, but now they're acting this way, and I would be judgmental to them. As much as I actually considered myself the same way, I had no choice but to actually look at other people and think the same thing. But I was unable to see that I was actually acting that way. And also, even for me, little by little, I would be lost together. And so just as I am, you have seen me. Now I can't even try to somehow hide myself or package myself in such a holy manner. I can't do that. Just as I am, you have seen me. And it is actually your blessing as well. But when I actually reveal myself as I am, that also becomes my biggest weakness. In some sense, it should be the best, the biggest blessing, and we need to be able to receive grace together. But when we are deceived, then there really is nothing that we can actually do anything about it. It's only good when we are in grace. And therefore, mankind, are we always in grace? No, because the moment we fall into deception, we are no different than anything else. And that's why 40 years in the wilderness ended. Why did God actually allow something like that to take place? Why is it that they had to go through that kind of a process? More and more, I'm unable to deny, and I have no choice but to acknowledge that their state is the same as my state. Our state where we are actually receiving grace together. And so on the surface, when I look at ourselves and when I look at the church, we are truly living through this rough wilderness. It is the church in the wilderness. But the thankful thing is this. Isn't it more so as time progresses? Blessed are you, O Israel. Who is like you that have received salvation like this? And the more you come to realize that this truly is a miracle, the more you look into the past, you realize that this is not a path that a human actually can seek after. This is not a path that we can actually take knowing where we're going. But this is a path that is guiding us to the salvation of God. And so all we did was just wander and just walk in confusion. However, God has always been guiding us to the path of life. A path where we have no choice but to be able to live. And therefore, the more I realize that, the less I have things to say about. And the only thing that I can actually do is give thanks. Not only that, from head to toe, even though I am broken down, and even if I'm hit left and right, even that itself, I consider it the scars of glory. And you can also give this confession. This is not the path a mankind can actually take on their own. However, God has always been guiding us on this path which leads to life in Jesus Christ. And so even though we were lost, in our own way, little by little. As much as we were able to receive that kind of grace, more and more you are able to see the road to heaven. And so you are heaven bound. Amen. And so don't just speak about the problem. Because of that problem, you are living this life that has been bitten by a snake. And we are basically whimpering in pain because we have been bitten by a snake. And because of that, we are still suffering and we are just groveling in our own sin. However, God, within the blessing of working out His work of salvation in our life, He is actually working so that in the end it'll sum up to good. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. And before I actually took this verse, and I thought, okay, whatever I do, He's going to actually make things good for me. But of course, the only thing that I leave out is salvation, and therefore, this is not a correct way to read this verse. But little by little, this reality of faith where He is actually working out that salvation in our life, and that kind of a life where we are living by faith from first to last, when I am little by little living that kind of a life, I actually read this verse now and I think, oh, this is what He's actually talking about. And now I'm able to give thanks to God, even within my scars. All the things that I had no choice but to bind myself to because of the scars that I received in the past, I now realize that I have been set free. And I have been set free from all the oppressions that I had. And I'm able to discover that changed part of me. And realize, oh, this is the life that I am now living, which is a life you live in Jesus Christ. And it is a lifelong process. And I am still basically rolling around in my own sin. But I am nonetheless so thankful. And I give this confession, if I can actually grow of age in this kind of a manner, I'm truly thankful. Does the world actually know this kind of a mystery of living this kind of a life? Of course they don't know. They can't even actually see what is evidently in front of their eyes. And they're basically bound to the things that they can only see. And even though we have been given these two extremities where we have to live by, and of course, even that alone, they don't even understand what it means. But the gospel, this is why Jesus said this. He will set the captives free. He will make the blind see. And these words, God allowed you to be able to listen to these words. And when God allows salvation to come before you, that is actually the day of grace until the second coming of Jesus, through the foreshadow. He simply came in the flesh until the second coming of Jesus. This is the work that He is constantly doing, which is the work of salvation of Jesus Christ. And this is the work that He is doing in the lives of the believers even now. And so Moses says, please send someone else. And the Lord's anger burned against Moses. Of course, God has emotions too. I'm just so thankful that God is like this as well. And we also have to acknowledge that we are receiving grace according to our own level. We have to acknowledge that. Before, as much as He gave us grace and some kind of power just took place, and we thought we thought we were special, and we made ourselves someone special. Verse 14, then the Lord's anger burned against Moses, and He said, what about your brother, Aaron the Levite? And so I also experienced something like this. And that's why I actually asked someone to, add someone who spoke better than me. As I was entering into the field, there was no way that I can actually prepare for the language. I already came to a resolution that I was not even going to study the language. And I knew my own level. And so I already came to that solution. And my excuse was, because of ministry, I could not have the time to actually study. But it was kind of embarrassing later because I actually did Chinese missions for about 10 years. And people would say, oh, you've been Chinese missions for 10 years? Wow. You must be actually very fluent in Chinese. And I told them, oh, I don't know a single word. And that's the reality. And that's the truth. For 10 years, if I was doing missions in China, I should be able to at least speak basic Chinese. But when I tell them that I can't ever say a single word, the person might actually think, oh, what is this? But I was actually ashamed. I also basically bound myself and my level. But there was someone else like me here, which is Moses. What about your brother Aaron the Levite? I know he can speak well. So God already knows. He knows that they're both the same brothers, and He knows that Moses does not speak well, and He knows that Aaron has a quick tongue. And how to speak well is very important. Isn't that true? And he can actually do his work just through his words. And he knows that, Aaron speaks well and Moses does not. So why did He actually choose Moses to do his work instead of Aaron, who speaks well? And so I told you that in that kind of sense, I also have a lot of scars. As much as I actually meet my own limitations, I'm basically driving my life, basically throwing myself, and I am pursuing perfection. And as much as I'm actually driving myself and pursuing for perfection, I'm actually binding myself and imprisoning myself in that. And it's not an average joke. The fact that I receive salvation itself is a miracle. And afterwards, even if it's just a little bit, God is the one that allows us to live by faith from first to last. However, working out that salvation as a believer is not an average thing. So already when you look at people, well, you know what happens inside me? I basically try to compare themselves with me, especially when it comes to sermons. I would listen to them speak, and I would be calculating inside me, calculate his level compared to myself. And so if I feel like this person is better than me, then I will just crawl before him, just automatically. And based on that standard that I have inside, I would actually build relationship with people accordingly. But if that person seems like is not better than me, then already when I talk to them, I'm already looking down on them. This is automatic, and therefore the human relationship that I would have, I will bind myself and I will also bind other people according to the position that I actually give to them, if they are higher than me or if they are lower than me. And therefore I would have this vertical relationship with people. And so in that same world, I will oppress people and I will be the one that's oppressed. In that kind of relationship, we say that we believe, and yet we're not that different. And the things that happen to the people in this world, and also the things that happen amongst the people who say that they believe, it's basically the same thing that happens in their lives. The problem is this: the more we try to make this better, our standards will be a bit more strengthened. Will it be better or worse? One side will actually become more strengthened, and we don't even know. And only when it is actually revealed through the working of the serpent, that's when actually everything breaks apart. And we actually try to bite each other. And we're constantly trying to win over the other. And this is a repetitive battle. And we're basically just shedding blood, and we're continuously fighting like this. And some people say, time will tell. Because, even scars, they will heal after time passes by. And so even your body is also a testimony. You have a scar and you just let it be, it will become hardened. And you will be able to withstand. And that's how people are actually living. And that's the benefit of the body. And even through that, what can we actually see through that? Not the staff that's used to herd sheep, but the staff is actually changing into the staff of salvation. It's the same type of sin, but within the grace where you are attaining more of salvation. That grace and that sin continuously is inside us. And so I know that I do have a problem of my own limitations, but on one side I realize that it's regardless of my limitations and my skills. And I do respond according to my level, and therefore sometimes I do feel bad. And I did try to learn, and I tried to do a little bit, but the more I actually tried, I realized I really couldn't do it. And so I just gave up. And that was basically my level. So even with just that, I couldn't do it. You being able to just reveal your weakness as a weakness, even that is not enough. You need to actually take a step further. It needs to be changed. If it is not for the power of salvation, then it will not be resolved in the end. As much as God has worked in your life, I did not know that I had changed. But as I was living my life, all the things that I was actually very embarrassed about in the past, it now became my something that I can actually boast about, how God actually worked in my life. And so in my life that I was able to actually live, I was able to share about my weakness. Isn't that what gospel is? That's the power of the gospel, or power of salvation. He will speak to the people for you, and it will be as if he were your mouth, as if you were God to him. He is already on his way to meet you, and his heart will be glad when he sees you. And this is what I actually experienced. Being able to speak well, that is actually a good skill to have. So I don't look down on people who actually have those skills. It is actually a very valuable skill. But as much as we were unable to change within that standard of, thinking that having something is actually better, our pastor, who used to help me translate in China, do you think that that process was actually easy for her? There were times when she actually ran away, or inside in her heart, she actually said that, "Oh, if I do this one time, then I'm never going to come back." Sometimes she even actually got in a fight with my wife, and it's not that they actually wanted to get in a fight. It was just they had no choice but to be like that. And when I went out into the field, I actually met this one pastor, and this person actually invited me to give a sermon, and so I went. And so it was a Russian church, so they actually had to translate into Russian, and this person who was translating for me was, I guess, Korean Russian. And so, and the person who was translating was of age too, and basically translated very well. And after the message was over and translation was done, so to speak, it was very scary. The missionary was actually crawling before the translator, and the translator was actually ordering people around. And I was only there temporarily as a guest, and all I had to do was just give one message and just leave. And so I was just as I was. But what was I able to see? No, he's a translator, but other than that, there was nothing else. Even though there were works that actually took place, it was actually done through the pastor. However, it was through his lips, and that righteousness, the self-righteousness that he had about him, in other words, he was very scary. His self-righteousness was very scary. And so Pastor Lee, who translated for us, was also there and saw everything that happened. And as I was there and watching all of that, God was actually asking me, what's the difference? It's not that, they're different. They're actually the same type of people. This is a problem that every single person has. And God actually works out the salvation for those people by faith, where you work out your salvation. And of course, during that time, we did not know of this very well. But little by little, as we were going on down our path in faith, he also allowed us to confirm in our faith. This is not something that we actually do. It's not something that this person did. It's not, they did well or not. It's not that level. So when I saw them, I reacted according to my own level. I thought to myself, if my translator was like that, I would just quit and I would just leave. But how could I actually leave? Because in that kind of realm, you actually have to continue your ministry, basically treading softly around your translator. And that's basically a realm where you are raising an idol. But if you do not know this, we have already been nurtured in this kind of a realm because of our self-righteousness. If we don't actually acknowledge their skills, where is God? Because that person already considers himself as God. They already gave up on God. This is a true human being. And this is something that I actually came across about maybe 15, 16 years ago. But even after that, little by little, I mean, now I can't actually enter into China again. But Pastor Lee sometimes calls me, or vice versa. And if we are to meet again, we will meet again in the future. But who is my brother and who is my mother? The one who actually does the work of the will of the Father are my brothers and my siblings and my mother. And of course, there was nothing that I would actually try to compliment about my translator. It was in the past, it was the same. Even now, it's the same. But does that mean that we did not actually have problems based on our level? No, that's not true. We did. However, little by little, in this blessing of where we are attaining more of our salvation, me as I was in my own level, and that person in their own level. Now it came to a point where we would just look at each other in our eyes, and we will know what we're trying to say. And I, time to time, think to myself, will people actually know this mystery? And I say sometimes that this is not something that we can actually conjure up on our own. This is not something that we can actually create. It's not something that we can actually decorate and show people. This is the blessing that God had already planned ahead, a blessing that is in His kingdom. And of course, we are still lacking. And even if it does show in our life, this is just our own level. However, little by little, it is done by faith. Through the things that are visible. And because we don't actually touch it, it looks more clearly. And because we don't actually touch our own standard, we are able to see our standard clearly. And so I don't know if we're going to talk about this in the conference or not, but if you look at Aaron as well, he also experienced this amazing work of Exodus. If you look at the work of salvation of the Israelites, as Aaron was actually translating for Moses, do you not think that he was feeling the same way? However, when Moses was not there, when God actually called Moses in order to give the law to the Israelites, he was gone for 40 days. I mean, Moses was there, but because he wasn't visible, that's when Aaron actually showed his true color, because a lot of people actually went to go see Aaron. And that kind of world does not mean that it wasn't there. It was there to begin with. And because they already knew that, they actually went to go seek after Aaron. And basically, birds of a flock together. And to people who are actually attaining more salvation by faith from first to last, it's just a matter of degree, and everyone also has that kind of standard, of course. But if they know the value and the blessing and the joy that comes by living living by faith from first to last, then the more they have, the more you end up wanting to seek after it. But birds of a feather flock together. This is kind of like a spiritual law. You know, if you are a non-believer, the non-believers actually flock together. And we can actually see that through Aaron when Moses was gone. What did Aaron say? He already knew. They already knew. They knew that they were going to relate with Aaron. And so they didn't even have to explain much. They were basically telling Aaron, hey, I think Moses left us. And so for us, you actually have to build Jehovah God who have actually brought us out of Egypt for us. That has been the 49th day. Moses was gone for 40 days. And so it was about 3 months after they actually exited Egypt. And so for 3 months, God was actually working through them so that he could actually do the work of salvation and work out the salvation in their lives. And as they were receiving the blessing of who is there like you, O Israel, that have received the salvation like you. And because they saw Aaron with Moses, giving the words and guiding them in the hearts of Israelites, they actually considered Aaron, great alongside Moses. But within the problems that they already had, in that world of the reality of faith has nothing to do with the righteousness of people. And people will not, try to stick themselves to other people. And of course, it's a matter of degree from people to people. But if you are living truly by faith, and you will know that this is actually the glory of God and not your own glory. But as much as you do not know that, Aaron will also be in the realm of deception, and he has been raised in that way. And the people who actually sought after Aaron, God is actually revealing their own problem of their level. And because of that incident, so many people were caused to die. And so when we really look at the work that God is actually doing, yes, we can be deceived. When God told Adam and Eve, if you eat of it, you will surely die. We really have no need to worry about the gospel. You do not need to worry about people. Oh, this person is so unfortunate. No, you are unfortunate. But even that God uses. And God is not actually trying to judge you. God, through his everlong patience, he is a merciful God. And in whatever the case, will carry out his work of salvation. And that's the work that he has been doing in the wilderness for 40 years. And so as I look at our translator, Pastor Lee in China, and of course other workers in China, and also her daughter, and of course their entire family can be used by God. And I've seen the daughter ever since she was young. And I'm getting older. And Pastor Lee is also getting older. But gospel is truly amazing. And the Chinese people are truly blessed. As much as you know the value of this, I think this might be the difference between Koreans and Chinese. And to that degree, I try not to interfere with the Chinese. And when they ask for some counseling, I do give them counseling. And if they want to kind of talk about something, I talk way over with them. And if they ask for some kind of message, then I also give them the message. But through the things that are visible and things that are manifested physically, and as much as we are actually sharing the gospel together within the field of China, as we are constantly sharing how God's kingdom is being established, even other people all over the world, as we are receiving this grace together. So look at the scripture reading. Let's rest a little bit because of time. We'll begin at 5 o'clock.